Social Studies, Chapter 7, The Stamp Act Crisis. The Big Question: why did the Stamp Act cause so much anger in the colonies? A tax on paper. The British also created new taxes to collect money from the colonists. In 1765, Parliament passed the Stamp Act. This law made colonists pay a tax on just about every kind of printed paper. The tax applied to about 50 different items in all. No Stamp Act. Down with stamp taxes. People began to protest against the Stamp Act. Vocabulary: taxation without representation. The idea that American colonists did not have a say in the English Parliament, which enacted taxes without their consent. Under the Stamp Act, colonists had to buy special tax stamps from a tax collector. They would put a stamp on each of the taxed items that they used. Every time that they bought such things as a newspaper, a calendar, a marriage license, or any kind of legal or business paper, they had to pay a tax. They even had to pay a tax on playing cards. This made many of the colonists very angry. Do you see why the colonists were so outraged? Had their own colonial assemblies passed this tax law? No, they had not. It was the British Parliament in faraway London, England. Sure, British subjects living in Great Britain were already paying a stamp tax, but those subjects were represented in Parliament. The colonists were not. They could not elect members of Parliament. They had no voice and no representatives in Parliament. What right did Parliament have to pass a law taxing them? None. Absolutely none. To the colonists, this was taxation without representation. It was completely unjust. A leader emerges. One colonist who strongly protested the Stamp Act was a 29-year-old Virginian named Patrick Henry. Patrick Henry was a member of the Virginia Assembly, known as the Virginia House of Burgess. He gave a powerful speech against the new tax. He warned that the Stamp Act would take away the colonists' liberty. Patrick Henry's speech was printed in newspapers throughout the colonies. The speech made people think. In New York, Boston, Newport, and other places throughout the colonies, people protested, debated, and formed groups called the Sons of Liberty. These groups threatened the stamp tax collectors. Many stamp tax collectors decided that the best thing to do was to get out of town and forget about selling tax stamps. The colonies protest. Vocabulary: boycott, a form of organized protest in which people refuse to buy goods or have anything to do with a particular group or country. The Sons of Liberty did more than threaten tax collectors. They also organized a boycott of British goods. People throughout the colonies agreed not to buy goods from Great Britain as long as the Stamp Act remained a law. Vocabulary: patriot, a person who supported the cause of the colonists during the American Revolution. Course of action, a plan to respond to a situation. Like the Sons of Liberty, women's groups called the Daughters of Liberty helped support the boycott. One of the most important goods purchased from British merchants was cloth. To make up for the growing shortage in the colonies, the Daughters of Liberty wove their own cloth. The Sons of Liberty, Daughters of Liberty, and many other people who supported the colonist cause also gave themselves another name. They called themselves patriots. Colonial leaders knew that they could do more to put pressure on Parliament. Colonial leaders called for a special meeting of all the colonies to decide on a course of action. In October 1765, 9 colonies sent delegates or representatives to the meeting held in New York. Delegates at the Stamp Act Congress agreed on a number of statements that confirmed the rights of colonists as British subjects. They also asked Parliament to repeal the hated law. Vocabulary: repeal, to cancel or do away with something, such as a law. Resistance, an effort to stop a law or policy from taking effect. These actions by the colonists shocked the leaders of the British government. They were especially worried by the meeting of the Stamp Act Congress. Never before had the colonies acted together against the British government. British leaders did not want this to become a habit. British merchants weren't happy either. The boycott was causing them to lose a lot of money. In 1766, after 1 year, Parliament repealed the Stamp Act. When the news reached America, the colonists celebrated. Through their resistance, they had brought an end to the hated Stamp Act. Of course, they still loved their king. No one was talking about leaving the British Empire. The Stamp Act had really been nothing more than a conflict between members of the same family.